Professor Frederick, I was wondering if we could ask you, because you shared something that once again I think of as once in a lifetime. This concept that you referred to in this chapter that you've retold in a very kind of extended way about becoming Kubrick, at least for a week, but doing so in such kind of the wake of something uh, kind of under the worst circumstances, I suppose you could say, at least for director Kubrick and his family and maybe all of his followers over a quarter century ago. Um, I hope to ask you about another director who I think we all remember and you've worked with closely over your career as well. But before we maybe ask you about him, I think I may be remiss again if I didn't at least mention uh, director Kubrick's second to last film, Full Metal Jacket, from the year I think 1987. I want to say briefly that you say that he was a director known for deliberating quite an extended time from one film to the next, but that often led to what you call in the book no mediocre films. Right, every film was kind of like very impactful and kind of like not just like a sequel or not just a knockoff or what have you. Um, I'll share this with you briefly. For the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War this year, there were many events, either here in San Jose, where I grew up, my hometown, or even anywhere else that Vietnamese Americans are. There were also Vietnam War events wherever Vietnam vets may be, or just wherever people wanted to sort of think about the war half a century ago. And I noticed, I can't remember exactly which university that I saw, but I think a university back in April somewhere in this country planned a screening of Full Metal Jacket in the month of April. So in my mind, I believe that film, now almost 4 decades ago, still comes to mind when people think about Vietnam War films. And I know that when we had an interview last month, close to Veterans Day, where a book about Vietnam War film criticism was reviewed,
Hmm.
I think Full Metal Jacket is definitely one of those films that was sort of referred to briefly, but we didn't say much about it. Obviously, for over a quarter century now, we can't really ask director Kubrick directly about what he thought about this film. Do you have input on it based on you following his whole filmography? Because I feel like for Vietnam vets, that film in one way or another is quite visceral. And even if you're not, even if you're just a civilian watching it, I remember parts of it were quite visceral.
I think so many films about the Vietnam War are visceral, obviously. And I think there are a lot of really strong ones. Whether it's Apocalypse Now, Platoon, The Deer
Mm-hmm.
Hunter is a very strong film that won the Academy Award. And then, Full Metal Jacket was Kubrick's interpretation of the event, and a very unusual one. This was a film that was, you know, not shot anywhere near Vietnam. I believe it was shot on a set that it just didn't. He brought Vietnam to this to England. Is my recollection. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I know for a fact it was not shot on location. And
Mm-hmm.
so like a lot of Stanley Kubrick films, it had a very, I can't think of any other word but to say Kubrickian feel to it, look to it. He has a style in his films of which I'm constantly watching. I'm a huge fan
Mm.
before I even worked on Eyes Wide Shut, um, where he does something very particular, I find. A character says a line. And then he, instead of cutting away immediately, whether it's the drill sergeant or boot camp scenes in Full Metal Jacket, doesn't matter. Kubrick has this kind of editorial quirk, I would call it, where he
Mm-hmm.
holds on the character for a second too long, or I don't want to say too long, but where most other editors and filmmakers would cut away to the person they're talking to or another scene or whatever. He creates this kind of uncomfortable moment that you're sitting with the character. And what I ask all of you out there listening to this, to the next Stanley Kubrick film that you see, notice this. It's really fascinating. He just holds a little too long, and it creates a very uncomfortable moment, I think, for the viewer. It engages you. You kind of lean in on your seat a little more. You're wondering, okay, and you tend to listen more. And so that's one of the skills of which he had many. He started as a professional photographer. So all of his films have a look that is just very striking. And Full Metal Jacket is no different. The action scenes, uh, the kind of demented humor, believe it or not, in the boot camp scenes, I think are really incredible. Performances, as always, are great,
Hmm.
and there's a message there. And I do think he's one of the few filmmakers that has, you'll never see Clockwork Orange 2. You would have seen a sequel from Stanley Kubrick. He wanted to investigate a story and then move on to The Shining or 2001 or Eyes Wide Shut or Full Metal Jacket or my favorite, Barry Lyndon,
Hmm.
um, which some people find extraordinarily slow and deliberate, but I find it painterly and satirical and just a great story, that one.